Hi there, Dr. Karp here, and this is What's Your Story? And I subtitled it Evaluating Self-Image for Health Improvement because we're going to be discussing exactly what you can do to sort of get your mind in the right frame of mind so that you can make the changes that you want to make this year in your health, your weight, whatever it is that you want to do. We need to look at how we see ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves, and then what can we do about that? What can we do to improve that? This is a story in 4 parts, and as I've discussed on many occasions, our person is divided into 4 parts: the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual. And if you're going to make substantial changes in your life, you need to be able to look at each one of these and to address each one of these levels, each one of these 4 parts. So this is a story in 4 parts. Now, the word kalo, which a teacher of mine by the name of Gerald Epstein frequently reminds me, is the root word in English that health comes from. And it also means whole, health, and holy. And this is a reminder for all of us that changing our lives and getting healthier is a process of becoming whole, becoming restored, becoming healthy, and also that this is a holy task. And the reason it's a holy task is that when we start on the physical level, as I've mentioned, these 4 levels, we continue to go up this tree to a point where we actually reach a level that is holy. Let's start with the physical stories that we tell ourselves. What is the physical story that you tell yourself about your health? And it may be unspoken. We don't necessarily have a conscious awareness of the story that we're telling ourselves. But keep in mind that there is a story that we're telling ourselves. We buy into this story even if it isn't true. Now, here's an example of a story that some of us may have. The story goes like this: I have trouble losing weight. I've tried everything and nothing works. Nobody supports me, and it seems that I will never achieve the health that I want. For a lot of us, we tell ourselves these stories, these, in this case, physical stories about what's happening in our physical lives, and we're not even consciously aware of it. Oftentimes, it's actually an image that we have in our mind. It's an image of frustration, an image of us not being able to do things. We see that in our mind's eye, in our imagination. We see people not supporting us. We see it, and that reflects in our reality. Believe it or not, these stories that we tell each other, if we don't become conscious to them, we become victims of those stories. And the purpose of this particular video is to really get to the bottom of the stories that we're telling ourselves, because when it comes right down to it, a lot of times the stories we tell ourselves are based on things that we've accepted that have come out from outside of us. We've accepted it as truth, and it's played out in our lives. And we need to, I guess I could say, we should investigate these, and that's why I've made this video. Now let's go to the next level, to the emotional stories that we tell ourselves. So what's your emotional story? Here's an example. My moods are uncontrollable. Food makes me feel comfort and ease. I don't get the emotional support I need from those around me. This is a very common emotional story. Now, these are just examples of stories that I've certainly heard among my patients, and I'm just sharing them with you. But what is your emotional story? How would you describe, or more likely, what would you say your emotional story is? Because we all have this sort of script that we play out in our minds that once we, in other words, if we don't become conscious of it, as I've said before, we're not able to make any changes in it. Let's go to the next level, which is the intellectual level. So what are the intellectual stories that we tell ourselves? Here's an example. I am not smart enough to understand all the conflicting information about health out there. Every time I try, it seems to get more complicated. What I do understand, I can't seem to implement. Again, this is just another example of a story that we tell ourselves, which essentially all of these stories are representative bits and pieces of things that we have sort of taken on ourselves and oftentimes aren't true. Now we're going through all of these different levels to get an idea of this collective story that we keep telling ourselves, even if it's true or not true, even if it's misleading, unhelpful. We keep telling ourselves these stories because we believe that they're true, not understanding that we have that these are very much more malleable than we think they are. The next level is the spiritual level. What are the spiritual stories we tell ourselves? Well, here's an example of one that I've gotten many, many times from my patients. I'm not worthy enough for God to intervene in my life. God has better things to do than help me. I am ashamed before God. This is an example of a very negative story. All of these are portraying stories that are unhelpful and untrue. And the reason I say that they're untrue is because at every moment of every day, we have the capability of changing our story. We are constantly in this sort of miraculous moment where we can tell ourselves that from this point on, we have a new story. We are so much more malleable and moldable than we think we are. This is an example of a story that we can change. So what we're going to do now, and this is somewhat experimental in the sense that I've never really made a video about this, I've certainly discussed it with people, is I'm going to challenge you to construct a new story. And it is not going to change the authentic person that you are. It's going to change those things that are not serving you, and it's going to lead to you being more authentic. And the rules for constructing this story are as follows. The first is everything should be framed in the positive. You shouldn't say things like, I am no longer going to think X, Y, and Z, or the people around me are no longer are as opposed to before now going to do this. Everything has to be in the positive. You'll see this in a moment. You want to include all four levels, the physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual, into your story so that you're creating something that exists on all four of those levels. And that makes it stronger. It's like a four, like when you make a rope that has four different things in it, it is much stronger than one. You want to make the story make sense on all four levels. You want to make it in the present tense because this is the magic moment. This is the incredible moment that we're always given, that the past is no longer there and the future is not happening. And here we are in this moment, and we have the ability to make changes for ourselves that can construct a new story. And the final step is to include what you're going to give in exchange for making these changes or for receiving these improvements in your health, because we live in a world where when we receive something, it has to be balanced out by something that you're going to give. So when you're constructing your new story, you want to focus on all these things. We'll review it again after the example, but we want to be positive. In other words, we want to frame everything in the positive sense. We want to include all four levels. We want to make the story make sense on all four levels. And when I say story, I'm not talking about fictional story. I'm talking about the ability of all of us to be able to change some of the things about our lives in realistic ways. Make it in the present tense, and then include what you give in exchange for it. So here's an example of a story. It's easy for me to choose healthy foods. When people see me eating healthy food and exercising, which is good for my body and soul, I radiate happiness and strength that people can feel. I am an inspiration to those who love me. I receive help to understand my healing path from unexpected sources all the time. I will reach a healthy body fat percentage of X, whatever that may be, by 2019. My soul soars knowing that I am choosing a path of health, wholeness, and holiness. I learn each day to give to others as a thanks for my progress. So let's review this. So we are in this particular story, we are talking about the things that we have trouble with on a physical level, choosing healthy foods or exercising. We are talking about the emotions that I feel happiness and strength that radiates from me. I am an inspiration. I receive help to understand my healing path. That is the intellectual level. And I say unexpected sources because we are all aware, at least most of us are aware, that there are always amazing coincidences that happen all the time. And a lot of times they're happening and we're just not aware of it. We're just not awake to it. And so it's important to, for me at least, to put that into the story, that you are going to receive help because you've started on this path. So we've spoken about the emotional, and the intellectual is to receive help to understand things. And then the spiritual is that your soul is soaring and that you know that you are choosing a path of health, wholeness, and holiness, like we discussed with the root word, and what you're going to give. So you can be very specific. Perhaps it's, I wrote here, I learn each day to give to others as a thanks for my progress. But the more specific you make it, the better this story is going to be. So you could say, I will now, or I am volunteering to tutor a child each day as a thanks for my progress, or I give 10% of my income to charity as a thanks for the continual progress, or you express love to your family, or whatever it is you are giving that you've decided to make as an offering to God to help you in this progress. Okay, so let's move on. So let's review that. So we want to be positive. We want to make sure that everything is positive, that we're not bringing up negatives. We want to include all four levels. We want to make sure the story makes sense on all four levels. We want to make it in the present tense, and you want to include what you give in exchange for this. So what I'd like you to do is construct your own story. And what we're doing here is we are reshaping our self-image to be consistent with what we want to happen. And the reason this is so important is because we cannot achieve something that we can't even imagine for ourselves. A lot of us have this image and story in our head of who we are. And as long as that stays sort of a fixed image, it's going to be very difficult for you to make changes. It reminds me of a story in a book that I read many years ago. It's called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it was written by a plastic surgeon. And what was amazing about this book was, and I've certainly seen it in my practice, but I read this many years ago, and it really made an impact on me. And he would say, I remember there was a story in the book where a woman gets plastic surgery done, and he does a perfect job, and all of the defects that she saw are all gone. And she's looking at herself in the mirror, and she says, I see what you've done, and I see my face as beautiful, but I'm still ugly. And so a lot of us have inside of ourselves a self-image that is inconsistent with what we want to have happen to us. And what we need to do is we need to focus ourselves on the present, because anything that we do, anything that we are associated with, anything that we birth into our lives basically comes from an image in our mind. And if we are not conscious of that image and what we are birthing into the moment, then we're not going to be able to make the changes that we want to make. So be aware that all of these things about our lives are often garments around our soul. They are the ideas of our culture. They are tidbits of suggestions that people have given us that we've taken on as our own, that we've believed without critical evaluation. And at the core, We are a soul. We are a part of God. The rest is very malleable. And by changing it, you do not betray who you really are. It is you becoming more authentic. It's getting to the core of who you are. It reminds me of a quote from, I think it's Proverbs, but it says, "The soul of man is the candle of God," which means that at our heart, our purpose here is to be the light, to be a light. And all of these external things that we think are ourselves, even getting down to some of the thoughts that pop into our head, they aren't necessarily authentically who we are. We get to who we are authentically by examining all of these things that we may have accepted without critical thought, these images that we've accepted. It's almost like we swallowed them and we are living out these ideas that are not consistent with the ultimate nature of who we are. And when you create this story, it is essentially a form of prayer. We are sort of offering up this story in the moment, knowing that we are fully malleable, that we are fully capable of making these changes for ourselves, and it's a form of a prayer. And when you say it, and we'll go into how you say it, then you should let go of it. Let it go up, let it ascend, and then we'll see what happens. So what if you, and I've certainly dealt with this, what if you say, well, I just don't believe that. I just don't believe the story that I've come up with. Well, you want to make sure that your story is something that you can visualize. And when you visualize it, you need to do so with an incredible amount of emotion. And emotion is sort of the energy of the universe. It is what is, especially in the West, it is what moves things. A lot of times there's this dynamic between the Eastern spirituality and Western spirituality, but the West, the biblical characters, as an example, were deeply emotional beings. And we don't need to suppress our emotions in this regard. We want to use our emotions to visualize and make this story something that you can see in your mind's eye. So you want to pare down, memorize your story, try to make it as succinct and specific as possible, and you want to say it out loud with emotion 3 times per day, morning, sundown, and evening, or whenever you need it. If you are in a situation where you are being tempted, you can rehearse or review your story and say, "I choose healthy food with ease." And this is different than an affirmation. I know it may sound like an affirmation to a lot of people watching this, but this is a way of, again, you're visualizing this. You're visualizing the being that you're becoming. So you want to use your imagination as much as you possibly can, especially if you're having trouble sort of believing the story that you just wrote. And believe me, a lot of times it's really that little devil on your shoulder that's saying that you can't be the person that you are visualizing here. But use your imagination, because there's a great quote by Mark Twain. It says, "You can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus." And I love that quote. And the reason I love that quote is because when we haven't exercised our imagination, we actually are incapable of seeing who we really are. That's how important your imagination is. Imagination is not making things up. It is a power of your soul to see things in a deeper way. So you cannot depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus. So we need to exercise our imagination as much as we possibly can and believe that things are possible. Because there's that other quote, which I like, which says, "We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are." Our, our task here is to be able to see things as they are, and in other words, move our ability to see things as we are, have them overlap in a sense, as we expand our imagination. And again, you can think of this as a prayer. And when you think of it as a prayer, it's as if you are offering up this image as a form of a prayer to be able to make substantial change in your life. So now it's your turn. So I want all of you, if you're up for this, to write your own story. And you can post this on the page, or you can send me via Facebook Messenger. However you want to contact me, feel free to contact me. I can help you hone this into a story that is really transformational when it comes to health. But remember, you can use this for any aspect of your life. You can use it for relationships, for business, for your ability to socialize, or whatever it is that you want to, I don't want to use the word improve, but to get to more of an authentic place where you can see things the way they are. And this really is transformational. And I hope that all of you who are watching will give this just a try and then contact me with your story so I can see it if you feel comfortable sharing it, and we can go over it. We can hone it into something that's really easy to memorize and powerful and positive. But ultimately, I want everyone to expect the unexpected when you start this, because this is a new path. This is a new way of looking at things, and anytime you start on a new path, it can be very bumpy. So, but once you get the hang of it, it's really amazing. You just have to push through, and you have to use your imagination, reinforce yourself. But it's important to know that we all have a supportive community here, and you're not doing this alone. Hopefully we'll have a lot of people who will volunteer to share their story and to memorize it and to start incorporating it into their daily lives. So that is What's Your Story? I really look forward to everyone sharing. And again, you can share just on the page, or you can send me a personal message. And all I can say is this is an incredibly transformational exercise. It's a little bit out there, I know, but it's a new year, and this is one way to make an incredible transformation for yourself. So leave your comments below, and I'll see you on the next video.